Hello and welcome to the skating lesson. I'm Dave Lees.
And I'm Jonathan Byer, and I'm excited. I was like, Dave, it's got to be just us. We got to talk out my favorite discipline of all at this World Championships together.
The men's event. We actually had a late-minute cancellation, but it's okay because half the time that we have guests for all four disciplines, people say, we just want to hear your opinions anyway. So I said, you know what? Let's just do it. So we are here to discuss the men at the World Figure Skating Championships, and I'm excited, Jonathan.
I am too. This was the discipline for me that made this World Championships absolutely magical. Yeah.
I was thinking this morning about which disciplines were the best here and throughout the season. And I think the men's event has been very strong overall throughout the season. And I was wondering if one of the reasons, even though people point out to the retirements, right? And they point out to the fact that the retirements are gone this season and that the Russians are banned, and people who don't want the Russians say, no, it's just the retirements, yada, yada. Okay. The one thing I will say is that without the Russians, that this is the event where I think the Russian men had the least consistent stranglehold on a medal in any discipline. So these men have been more used to being in the conversation for medals throughout the last several seasons. And also Yuzu has had injuries throughout the last several seasons as well. So he hasn't always been at every competition. So, you know, there hasn't been that place where everyone is just fighting for a bronze and suddenly they're in it for a gold, and suddenly the person that was seventh is in it for a, these skaters have been able to see themselves winning and getting better throughout, the last couple of seasons. And I think that the retirements were expected. So right. I think that the mental shifts have perhaps been more natural as well. And there's always been great depth.
And most of the top 10 here have been players for a long time. And yes, as we have talked about, the pairs is having its issues with IJS at the moment and the programs and these sorts of things. And we have definitely seen it almost just stall out and plateau in the women's event, where we are getting formulaic, everybody's kind of the same or a variation on a theme. What I loved so much about this men's competition is you saw top 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, all of them, the top group of men were so individually themselves. Yeah. Each one had their own approach to the program. Each one had their own personality on the ice. Each one has their own strengths and weaknesses. And I was watching a varied competition of apples and oranges in a positive way, instead of just seeing the same program 20 times and seeing which one was the cleanest that day.
I really enjoyed this competition. Watching it felt easy and nice to watch in a way that we don't, because I like to see a balance between technique, and that doesn't just mean jumps, but like well done jumps, right? With ride out and flow and music, the way Belinda was talking about Junhwan Cha's quad. What more could you want, when she was listing off all the bullets, right?
And my response to Belinda and Mark about their commentaries, what more could I want?
Yes.
They were sensational at these games. They were at these championships. They were absolutely wonderful. Yeah.
So I felt like the quads that we were seeing, most of the skaters who placed well were doing content that was within themselves that wasn't a reach. So we didn't see those quads popped into doubles so often. And it just, for me, made it more enjoyable. I know there are people that want to see quads pushing forward and they want to see all of the harder quads. But for me, the programs that I'll remember have little to do with the jumping passes itself and more to do with the overall combined program. And I think that is often what we see missed. And it's not often like the first and second place skater, right? Where that is, it's the other skaters, right? It's the 8th place, it's the 5th place, it's the 4th. In the group where you start to see, just one miss after another miss. And the energy was going the other way. And that happens to, like, the energy feels positive and the buzz is in the arena and everything is going well, and you start to see good performance after good performance. And there was kind of that magic here where you could see the skaters all doing well. And I thought
so many green boxes in this group.
Meadows.
Yes. Yeah, and it just, I like that. It was just delightful to see, because again, it's not a splat fest. You're not watching all this messiness. It was, God, I just loved it. Everyone was
Well, you
skating
love
very
to
well.
quote Sandra, who says the program only matters when they land the jumps, but we saw a lot of people land the jumps here, and then they could differentiate that. One strategic decision that I thought was interesting is that last week, we really felt like Adam from France was going to be a major player here, French Adam, as we call it, Adam Suova.
Yeah.
I really, expected he had a consistent season. He did really well. Some little errors on the European Championships in the free skate, but really had a spectacular season. But when we saw him earlier in the season, he was primarily doing quad toe and quad sow, right? But we started to see on Instagram that he was practicing and landing quad flip and quad lutz, some of which he put in here. And I remember when we interviewed Tim Gable, it was our first interview, and he said, I always remember this, that Frank Harrell's theory was that if you didn't have the jump in your program by Skate America, which is end of October, that you weren't going to have it for the season. It's just never a good moment. And I think we saw this kind of with Deanna and Max when she got sick and they wanted to put the quad sow in, right? Like something always happens. Or if it doesn't happen, you're in a pressure situation about to win nationals, and maybe it's not the time to put the new jump in if you're being consistent and getting quality, right? So there's almost never, and then for continents isn't ideal to put a new thing in because you're so exhausted after nationals and you're setting yourselves up for worlds internationally, right? It's not that ideal moment. So I kind of think Frank had a real point there with Tim. Like if you want to do the 3 quads, you have to have them ready. And I think we saw with Adam, going for harder content that you did earlier in the season when you're in a medal winning position, which you haven't been in before. I think that was maybe a strategic error.
I think so.
He was so strong and he just seemed very off axis. I don't know if he was injured. We saw, I know that Conrad Orzel's blade broke in practice on the first day here. We saw people that wear a Dea with their boots breaking down in between. I think June had a different pair of boots, I think he said, for the free skate than he did for the short program. I mean, I think the thing with that is if your boots are going to break in quickly, they're going to break down quickly as well. That's just that's kind of how that works. So
yeah,
I see that time and time again, especially with the numbers of jumping, the amount of jumping that people do before a big competition, the boots do break down. So anyway, I thought Adam was the disappointing performance for a skater at this competition compared to what they did throughout the season. And at the same time, hopefully a learning experience, because it looks like he's been on the rise the last 2 seasons, that we will kind of 2.5 that we will see him again and better. I don't think.
Well, and again, if I had seen just the results in terms of flags and I saw that a French flag was 4th, I would have been like, oh, Adam is 4th and Kevin is 10. Good for Kevin. I didn't realize, I was sort of expecting the opposite between the 2 Frenchmen. And Adam has been on the rise, and this is the first season it's really been coming to full fruition. And I would suppose it's a learning curve. I would think for me, like, there are times to take the risks and there are times not to. And even though there's something thrilling about like throwing it all down for a world championships, given the adrenaline, given the nerves, given the pressure and expectation, I would err on the side of comfortability so I can trust in those moments instead of, again, dealing with all the pressures of that championship and the pressure of new content.
I have to say, for as much as this season hasn't been the greatest of all time in skating, there have been a lot of great moments that I'll look back on programs that I would actually rewatch, which don't always exist in this kind of venue. And the one thing I'll say about this season is that cricket club approach, what we saw with June, where he does some quads, not all of the quads, right? Or we saw with like Rika Kihira and Jason, where they just focused on quality and getting those GOE points. They managed those skaters well, whether they were with them the entire season or not. When they worked with them, it worked well. I thought that was impressive. It's interesting that the cricket club was dead, like had no one at the beginning of the season, and then had a very strong world championships at the end. They had to come back of all comebacks this year.
The exception, perhaps, unfortunately, being Boyan Jin, who was really struggling here.
Do you think anyone can help Boyan Jin at this point with all of the medical issues that he has had, the injuries at this point? I was surprised he kept going, honestly.
Yeah. And whether that was his choice or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. And I do have to say, Belinda just delivered in commentary across the board.
Yeah.
And I asked Mark, I said, you don't talk as much. He said, Mark knows not to talk. And I was like, that is clear. Yes.
But he really took the lead on the dance comment. I mean, it all made sense to me, and they were a great partnership, and both.
I want her to commentate every event. Okay,
yes.
From home, middle of the, you know what, they can reschedule the competitions to when Belinda is awake, maybe in her nightie, whatever. But, you know, if she could just zoom in, I want to hear her at every competition. I like that she's on top of the practices and watching.
Great comments. Great comments.
And like subtle shade at times, but she would deliver it. Ooh, that lift looked very unsteady. And you were like, sure did, right?
Yeah, and she was right, yeah.
Wasn't lying, right? And that's what I think is, I think that sometimes Ted apologizes and tries to make excuses, and she just wasn't. She would, and Mark will play it up a little too, where they're afraid. She just said things directly, not meanly, not
analytically. Yeah. Because again, when the commentary is so fluffy, you wonder why everyone didn't just all tie for a first place win.
Yeah.
And some of the commentary in the past for Eurosport, which has always been my preferred commentary over the North American commentary, but oftentimes it was very nice. And there's nothing wrong with being nice, but then I'm like, well, then why are some people 20 points higher than others if everyone's just wonderful? Yeah.
I thought she did a great job explaining the differences among the skaters and why certain people got the scores that they received. And I thought that she did a really great job. I loved when she called out Morris Kivitishvili on those quad jumps that he does. She really honed in on his sow and toe technique.
And I will never, for the life of me, understand. He also invited to skate at the gala.
I don't understand how that happens.
Yeah.
I don't find him that intriguing. Now, he does get that small country bonus that he is a personality. I think a lot of it had to do with, well, he was with Eteri, he had that genie program and became known, but I don't find him to be that memorable of a skater. Outside of the fact that if he didn't train with Team Tutberidze, we probably wouldn't pay any attention to him.
I agree. I mean, this was, where did he place here? 20th.
Yeah.
For the 20th skater who's not a show, I mean, he was given an Elvis program and it doesn't offer you any personality in it. So it's fascinating to me that then that person is chosen for the gala.
You notice how all of the Eteri skaters, especially if they're from a country that's not Russia, right? Like, were they all paying for Dr. Shevetsky's services a year ago? And then now we see the drop off like we have never seen. I mean, that pair, unbelievable.
The George pair was really, really tough. And we saw them with some very like dangerous looking struggles.
It looks like they've never skated before or done some of these moves, which they were confident skaters a year ago. And you watch them now and you think like, what has been done to your body, right? What has been done to your confidence? What has been done? And that's like a multitude of factors, right? Remember Megan was saying how many injuries the skaters from Sochi had after they were on those supplements, right? And then
your body is going to change so rapidly the minute you stop taking all that stuff. I would imagine it's very discombobulated.
It's also the overtraining that's allows you to do. I mean, like, look at Trusova and the back issues that she has this season. I mean, we had that whole pyramid of the Eteri skaters last season, and almost every single one has had major, major injuries. Now, Valyeva, they have had a concerted effort to keep up as the #1 star in Russia. Notice that we don't, really, get hair samples from her. But, I wondered how they got her back into form when they needed to this season. But even that they couldn't control, right? And then you see some of the skaters who have retired, whose bodies have completely changed. But we know that there are skaters that go on hormone therapy when they retire. I mean, I think it's very obvious that it's just so strange how this one school of skating, it differs so wildly from the Olympic season to post-Olympic season, even though you see skaters from around the world, Kaori Sakamoto, Shoma Uno, doing really hard technical content, they haven't had as big of a variance. Alexa Clear, I'm like, right? Like her body didn't massively change from last year to this year. Injuries.
Well, and it's just interesting because as we've talked about the trimetazidine being able to basically ignore your body's message to you that it's time to stop and rest, that you push through what your body is asking for. It just all sounds so unnatural. I would think like there's a reason the body is telling you it's time to stop right now.
Well, it's also fascinating that they also do those TMS treatments. A lot of the treatments that they do are for post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's interesting how they apply it to sports in the sense of, yes, trauma is trauma, but like destroying your body is also trauma, right? Or having people scream at you, right? But then they do those TMS magnetic, where you put a magnetic electrodes on your brain and you wonder, what would that do if you're doing that from the training that you just endured so you could do it again tomorrow, right? Like this is not usual, right? And then we see what happens to skaters after they're finished, and I think, yes. So anyway, it's just interesting to see that drop off. That pair was a very disturbing performance.
I was upset. It was hard. It was hard to watch just because they're human beings and you see some real struggle there. And
I think Eteri has made her mark on pair skating. I think that made her mark. I mean, that to me looked like Trusova this season compared to last season. It just had that hallmark on it. But anyway, let's talk about.
Fortunately, the top several men
were amazing. Although I have to say, there's been this weird cognitive dissonance that Thomas Bach, and they're supposed to meet on the 28th, the IOC, about Russia. Now, hockey is not letting Russia and Belarus back. However, if the IOC reverses course, you don't know what other organizations will do. Hockey doesn't have to follow the IOC. If this all, goes down, and Thomas Bach the other day was giving quotes indicating that he doesn't think that the athletes should bear collective responsibility for the war, which indicates that he's trying to push them back in as neutrals, right? Trying to keep this alive. And it's coming down to D-Day, right? Where the war is heating up. They have to make a decision about Paris 2024, what they're going to do, because like the gymnastics team, as the rules stand now, cannot qualify a team to the Olympics. They may be able to qualify individuals unless they would for the summer games, they would have to change the qualification processes, which I imagine there could be tons of lawsuits for. So maybe Russia would have to accept having a smaller delegation as neutrals if they were allowed to compete, where many people don't think that they should be able to compete anyway. Yet, I mean, it's just going to be a very fascinating couple of months for sports, but we do see that the coaches are here. And to me, it seems really upsetting that the athletes are being punished for when the institution is the problem, and the Team Tutberidze coaches.
The institution is still around the championships here. Yeah.
And there is officials, as Megan was saying. Lekurnik was the official invited at Four Continents. There's so many things that it seems like they're trying to push their way back in, right? The ISU is not taking a strong stand. Everyone is afraid of what will happen if Russia comes back. Will they have the same political power as before, right? So do we need to not push too hard? Apparently, Eteri was best friends with Benoit the entire week. He did choreograph for Diana. So I think, more to come on that front, whatever is coming down the lines. But we talk about chess players and opportunists. I mean, birds of a feather.
Well, we know he loves chess because he always choreographs a Queen's Gambit program. So
yes, John, you're so full of puns today. Anyway, I felt Eteri's real penance came when she had to sit in the kiss and cry for Daniel Grassl. Now, it seemed like she sort of was nice to him before he went on the ice, but he did not perform well. It looked like she wanted to be anywhere but there, but was being forced to be in the kiss and cry. When we have seen her choose not to be in the kiss and cry when some of her skaters don't do well before, right?
Right.
He was sitting there, not looking at him, not talking to him about anything, looking away. The body language was like she was being punished for being in there, and it felt like her penance. I don't know. It felt like seeing someone be exposed as the emperor has no clothes, and they were just watching. It was a delicious moment. Okay, Russia may be back, but we will never forget seeing her with Daniel Grassl and the kids and cry. Okay, they have to.
Yeah, she had a 12th and a 20th place finish here for the men. Yeah.
Yeah, and how did the other Georgian boy do? The one that we forget about.
The EGADS.
Yes.
29th, didn't qualify for the free. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
what did Nikolai Morozov say to me? She wouldn't be as successful without her doctor if she came to the US.
Yeah.
So, well.
And plenty of people without doctors seem to be doing remarkably well.
Yeah. All right. So I think if skating wants to build for next season, the way the Olympic Channel had that Montreal series, and we still got great nuggets. We didn't get everything, but we got just enough to know that Hubble and Donahue dynamic. Yeah. Why was Zach and Nikolai Sorensen making swords, right? What was happening with those planned wine parties with like Chalk and Bates and Fournier, Baudry and Sorensen, like all of those dynamics that people will talk about, like, so on that Montreal show when that was happening, like, what was your take on, like little nuggets, right?
Yeah.
The ISU needs to hire those producers to make one for skating. And I have the cast in my mind, what we need to do.
Okay.
Sylvia and Kevin is a very unique situation.
Very emotional. Yeah.
Which I messaged Sylvia about this because my friend Jacob goes, well, they have some sort of messy kind of codependency going on. Like just snarkily, made me laugh. And Sylvia says, because she says that her relationship with Kevin is very similar to Tracy and Jason. They're just louder. She says, she's like, it's very normal. We are not German or Russian. We're Italian and French. We are driven by emotion. Well,
it's very clear. And I will tell you, he always has emotional responses to his skates. Angry, devastated, thrilled, whatever they are, he feels so big. And of course, that's to me what makes his skating so special, is you sense that this is just a super emotional artist, like vibrating on the ice. And that's what makes it.
I always think back, every time he skates, I think what Galina said. She's like, he's exactly like Misha Schmerker. And this is a Holeric personality. They will skate well once a year.
Well, what a time to do it.
What a time to do it. And you know what? And it makes them so freaking captivating.
Yeah.
So captivating. Like,
yeah.
Maybe we don't know enough about Misha Schmerkin. Okay. Because, like,
yeah. Incredible. I remember him. I liked him.
Right. But like we remember him like for different cultural reasons, but we didn't know the person behind. Yeah. Right.
I mean, I like these Kevin programs very much. I was impressed to see how even keel and steady the jumping was here. I did not know that was going to be possible for him.
The quad was stunning. He held on to that triple axel. I thought that his transition where he used that back move that he borrowed from Papadakis and Cizeron to build a home, which he really has brought into single skating, and he did it into the triple axel, double axel combination. I thought that was fantastic. He has a lot of great transitions and elements. He doesn't quite have the skating skills of Jason, but his program is interesting, and he does the most with what he can do and uses. I remember Deanna told me, she said, the pairs, you'll either get transitions from doing mini lifts or from doing like rockers, counters, twizzles, bracket. He has the best combination of difficult elements, right? So you could watch, Jason's transition into his double axel, a little bit different than Kevin's, but both great transitions, and they achieve it in different ways. So I really liked it.
And we'll get into Jason, but both of them being skaters, even though I'm aware that they are different abilities with the blade, but I can't take my eyes off of the program. In those, when we were saying those programs that now I'm looking on my phone. I cannot take my eyes off of either program because each moment is filled with emotion and some interesting move that no one else is doing.
So yes, we need Sylvia and Kevin need to be on the show. Tracy and Jason for next year. They need to follow Adam. Maybe we need to know a little bit more about, I think we need to know Lambiel with Dennis and Shoma and like follow this out. And if
Mhm.
Russia comes back, we need to see Eteri with Daniel Grassl. But this is what we need to be watching, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I'd watch it.
yeah. Maybe we could have June in the background when Jason is there, to see what's
Just
happening.
skating past.
There. But yeah, I thought Kevin was fantastic. And we've seen him do quad toe. We've seen him do quad sow. I know he had the ankle injury at the fall. I just hope that he can be healthy for a full season so we could see his maximum ability. Could he do two quads, right? I mean, I think he has the ability to be on the European podium, the World Championship podium, but rostrum, sorry, but will it happen? I don't know, but I think that his personality, his theatricality, and his just overall aesthetics are what need to be rewarded more in the sport.
Yeah, agreed.
Like, yes, he did one quad here. We would ideally like to see 2 or 3, but I thought that what he, in the words of Scott Hamilton, what he did very well, and that made it more enjoyable to watch than if it's best for me.
Agreed.
Because we could actually enjoy the program because he was landing the jumps.
Right. He was skating within his means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it was interesting that he and Jason went back to back and they both went clean. And I thought that also added something just in the natural progression of events to watch 2 skaters skate. That was 15 minutes of just spectacular.
Magic. Yeah. Yeah.
Loved it.
That whole final flight for me, each one brought something.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
It was also very enjoyable.
How about Jason? What was your just take on?
Just stunning. What I saw, and then like on the NBC commentary, they always use those like tchotchke phrases where they're like, or hokey phrases where they'll say things like he's really skating for himself. But there actually is something to that.
Why are you watching the NBC?
I know. It took me a while to realize, oh, right, I can do the VPN and watch the other. It's because I was watching on Peacock first thing.
Why?
I know. It was painful. And
I had taught you how to use the Opera browser.
And that's when I started using it for like.
And our friend Freddie Boudet, who always watches the show, he was messaging me yesterday about watching the men, and I was like, "Have I not taught you how to do the VPN with the Opera browser by this season?" I feel like, does anybody listen to me? Oh my god!
Amazing.
Right. Yes.
Well, it's because then I have to like mirror screen with my computer to the TV, and like premium or the NBC Peacock thing was just up there, so I just watched that. The thing that blows my mind about Tara and Johnny's commentary at these championships, of course, is that they're constantly explaining like no one has ever seen skating before. To which I think
that's their audience, though, that they're in charge of. They are in charge of communicating figure skating, not to you, but to the person who leaves golf on that sees skating and like will watch.
Who is that? What person is casually watching skating at 6 a.m. live from Japan, or has been able to navigate the Peacock Premium app to even figure out where the World Championships replays are? To me, it was such a niche audience that could even find the footage.
They don't know who their audience is, but theoretically, they are speaking to a mix of us, but also they're hoping to get those people sticking around who leave golf on that keeps the skating on.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and then
that's reality, right? You need those people.
But again, I think the layman will respond to people like Belinda saying, "Uh-oh, that lift was scary." Then they're engaged, as opposed to Johnny and Tara trying to like come up with funnier or more outlandish metaphors or adjectives to describe something.
If you want an average person, you may need to add a little bit more fluff for the average person, right? To
be invested in the skaters themselves, you mean? Yeah.
Well, suddenly we've gotten a couple people on the channel in the last week that are like, wait, who are you talking about? I don't know who the people are. And I'm wondering, like, how are you showing up in the algorithm? You don't know who Benoit is? Like, is this your first time watching skating? They want us to explain who Benoit. I'm like, I can't help you there. But yes, there's an audience for everyone. So anyway, as we moving along, Jason, I thought was spectacular. I'm loving this Tracy vibe that she's had the last 2 years. Tracy always has her glasses on top of her head, her readers, as though she's wearing them when Jason is skating. And she had this like smock dress on. It looked like she was maybe like gonna feed the cats, have a glass of wine, paint on an easel and watch some beautiful Jason Brown perform, just like to entertain her.
Sounds like a nice evening to me.
I really am liking her vibe lately here. And then she just like, Jason, it was the best. She delivered.
And he did the thing, like to the point of like he's skating for himself. What I sense is an adult with perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just sort of a different approach to all the things. He's sort of in his own bubble of like, yeah, I'm here. I'm here to just like be beautiful, skate in front of this amazing Japanese audience that was full. They were, and I loved that in between, like on ice surfacing and while we're waiting for the scores, they're not blasting obnoxious pop music through the arena to keep noise at all times. They let the drama build by going quiet. And then it's something everyone is waiting in anticipation for the score instead of tchotchke video. I keep saying that, that's the wrong word. Hokey videos up on the Jumbotron or some dumb interview with like someone in the stands or something like that. It just felt so amazing, the vibe in the
weird
arena.
Country music performances that were in Nashville last.
That are lot. It's horrible, and it cheapens the experience of this very serious championships. And so I loved that it was held here. And Jason was stunning. How did you feel about the revamped ending to Impossible Dream?
I love a lunge. Obviously, the other lunge was so spectacular, but not conducive to a jumping pass afterwards to be consistent. So yes, it was a little muted. In general, listen, magical program every time we've seen it. The one thing I will say is that the difference between nationals and here is that the Japanese audience is so respectful, right? Which is great. However, for a program like that, the one thing that was like different at US Nationals when Jason does that program is that every single move he's doing, people are like, yes, Queen, live, yes, woo, right? And it's not building, so it doesn't have that kind of viral moment because you don't sense, you could almost like sense the excitement and the tension like building as he skates, right? And you don't get that in the same way from this audience that was delightful and lovely. And I just wanted them to get out of their seats a little bit more for some of the performances because we
a more frenzied response. Yeah.
But then we also saw the skaters stay within themselves. So it was very lovely, but it didn't rouse in the same way, right? It didn't rain Pooh Bears in the same way, but it was a great event. So
yeah, agreed.
I think that being in Japan, I wish that the Federation had incorporated Yuzu in some way here. I think that would have been appropriate. So
yeah,
I mean, come on, he could have done his Firebird entrance, welcoming the World Championships the way he just did at his performance. I mean, can they build some sort of lowering from the audience? But yeah, no, I think that they could have incorporated that a little bit better. But overall, I thought that was. And
sometimes when a skater of Jason's ability ends up in fifth with a clean program and just gorgeous, gorgeous skating and all this sort of stuff, often the comment is, why is this not being rewarded more? However, in this championships, save one that was above him, they were all good skaters.
They were all good.
They were all quality artists, and maybe not.
He wanted him to get that medal, although someone said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Jason did medal." And I thought the people that were ahead of him were phenomenal. Like they skated well,
and that's the point. I'm trying to make.
And he skated so well. Like, who cares? He's going to get $1 million. Okay, he nailed 2 clean programs in Japan where he's done shows all year. He might as well get an apartment there because he is going to be busy for years and years and years being the top show skater of all time. So really, I think he can obviously do this. And the US figure skating should be looking at how they can keep him on a salary to come back for 3 competitions next season, because guess what? All of your men who medaled were completely ill-prepared for this competition. And the end of the season, Torgashev has not delivered at the last 2 competitions.
That was unfortunate.
Unfortunate. Naumov also didn't deliver, right? Hamden has not been a consistent skater. Jimmy Ma has not been consistent. Lucas out Junior Worlds didn't deliver, and Liam Kapekis. So I think if you were Mitch and Justin, I think you have to look at like the mental coaching that is being done off the ice and the kinds of run throughs and really organize how are we going to be more successful. And that doesn't mean being abusive to skaters, but it means really working on their mental game, working on what content are they putting in, what kind of decisions are being made, what kind of run throughs are being done, and how often are they sending those run throughs to judges every week. I mean, I think that there's a lot.
Even talking about that, they constantly had monitoring sessions with judges to make sure they were covering their bases in preparation. And of course, doing that would sort of instill that performance competition adrenaline and sort of help you practice under a bit more pressure. I also thought it was interesting when we had Christy Ness on after Nationals, she was saying, if you have someone who does well at Nationals and then turns around and sort of tanks the next competition, you do have to look and find out, was that happening in the training? Because if so, something obviously needs to shift in the training. And if that was not happening in the practices, then you definitely need to sort of reorganize your mental game plan going into an event. And clearly it's a disconnect for all of the men you just mentioned. It's just a matter of what is it? Yeah.
One of the things that they do in gymnastics, right, when they are picking lineups in colleges, and really even with the Crowleys to an extent, but we can leave them aside. In college, right, you have to get a lineup where you need 6 people to make an apparatus, right, for a college team. They will train and score those routines in practice and put them in a formula where they tell every single person their ranking throughout the season. Now, people are always upset with lineups, but by and large, people understand why they are, the alternate 7th instead of 6th, right? And it keeps everybody working, right? And then they get scored when they go into competitions. I imagine that if we did something like that with the guys so that Luca or Liam Kapekis knows that he needs to get 5 more points to, challenge Luca Broussard, right? Or I'm just picking up names and not points, right? If you know that, and like, I need to be more consistent. So my average is here, or my total, competition and how they're doing in the practices, right, leads to that. So your overall consistency. I imagine you may see better results. You may see people dig a little bit deeper in their preparation or become more focused or get more experience. I think that it needs to be a little bit more well-rounded and all-encompassing because something is amiss. And these are skaters with talent. And until they all get on the program and get that kind of consistency, I don't think that we're going to see better results.
Well, to sort of jump the gun on the conversation here, like Junhwan was also one of those, in my opinion. I have loved his skating since that Romeo and Juliet program, but we always saw this immense amount of talent and potential sort of unorganized at times in competition. And I am fascinated to find out what sort of preparation they did before these games that really made these 2 clean performances possible for him. Because I think in many ways, he reminds me of some of those lower level American guys where you see so many ingredients. Why isn't it coming together? And whatever they did obviously worked for these world championships.
And the excellence didn't change much, right, going into here, but he did do it. Obviously, I think that altitude in Colorado Springs was obviously a bigger deal than people anticipated for, because he could have won that championship as well. And
I assumed he was going to, yeah.
On paper should have, right, because he's a more complete skater than Cal Mura. Is that who won there? I'm confusing it. He won the Junior Worlds, but anyway, it doesn't matter. He was, he did not perform there. And I think if you look at the overall season, he's the kind of skater that should be second. I think it's fantastic for the sport that a skater that's well-rounded, he can jump, he can spin, he has, his great Ada Bauer, he has performance, skating skills. I would like to see them do something a little bit more original than Bond and Michael Jackson for next year. He's done a lot.
No, for him this year, these programs so worked for me.
Yes, they worked. But Jonathan, you're competing against Shoma Uno, right?
Yeah.
Shoma's doing Bach, right? The most glorious skater. To me, Shoma's competing for 9.5, 9.75, 10. If you give me Bond and Michael Jackson, I have you at like an 8.75, maybe a 9.925.
Isn't that funny? I think I disagree on this one because
that's why they're non-judges. But my judge, I'm like a Korean doing Bond. Are you kidding? Like I am done. Like I'm at.
But yet within that, they chose interesting cuts. I found all of the jumps so outrageously well timed with the music. I don't know. For me, it worked for him. I'll be intrigued what they choose for next season. Because
I think it's a bad program. I'm saying it's a good program of lower sophistication. Like that's.
I don't know.
Okay, no, you're allowed to disagree. They're not judges. That's why you're here.
What I will say is, oh my gosh, the timing of those quad sows with the music in both programs. It is just one of the most exciting. I know everybody talks about that damn quad axel, but I will tell you, his quad sow on that curve with the music in both programs is one of the most thrilling jumps of the entire event for me.
Yeah, no, it was. Belinda loved it too. She loved it. Also, my favorite is Jason Brown's new spins for the season, because we had seen him do the spins forever and ever. I just wanted to go back. When he lowers himself into the sit spin, it's phenomenal. Okay, there are so many moments in that Impossible Dream program. I think it's the better of the two programs. I know people love the melancholy short.
I do love it, but I agree with you that there's more nuance and sophistication to the free skate.
I noticed something new in the free skate every time I see it. I think it was Rotate's best of the best moment. So that and Cowrie's heavy like a first aid period short program that Roheen gave us, like it keeps every time it delivers. I thought that, and listen, Korea having multiple medalists with great performances, I think is helpful for the sport. Unfortunately, they don't have a Grand Prix next season. And in general, I don't know if we'll get to this in our women's recap or not, but how many times has Yi Lim Kim been worn out by the time she gets to the World Championships? And
I did look, they did have a Korean ranking event in between 4 continents and worlds.
Of course, why not?
But at least it was 1 and not 5.
Suddenly she looks so tired, and it looks like she's gotten in her head, and it looks like the Lutz edge has gotten in her head, and it was just a complete problem.
Yeah.
But I'd be curious if June had to do as many of those events or how that all worked, but it worked for him this season. I could be
making this up. I believe he skated at this event in between 4 continents and worlds, Korea Fest.
I mean, why was that necessary?
Right? It's not telling me when the dates were, but
that's all right. Well,
I mean, and obviously he won, and his scores were much lower at that event than they were here. So I'm assuming it did not go as well.
Seen her at the university games. We've seen her, like, I don't know, at the Ilderton Carnival. I don't understand why she's going to the Morris Open. Like, it's just really a lot. But
there are some points, I would think, in someone's competitive career that the more you get out there, the more you just do the thing, the better. But for a lot of these Korean skaters that have had a great deal of competitive experience, it just serves to wear them down. So it was just amazing to see. I love those sort of surprisingly joyous moments in the kiss and cry. And the one for Junhwan was definitely a huge one. It was just amazing to see. And to see someone, I have always enjoyed his skating. So to see it all sort of come together, I'm curious. Hopefully this can be a huge push for him into the next season.
Hopefully he will maintain that. Hopefully at the World Team Trophy, we'll see skaters do well and, kind of cement that status and build their profiles and build their followings. And I would hope that skaters get better at social media and they start to get more, we need to keep people in the sport and,
Junhwan, he has like the cutest handle. Isn't his like April, May, June, or something?
June, July, August.
Oh, okay, that's what it is. Okay. Clever.
Yes. And I always remember Corey Cercelli told us that June flies to Korea to get his haircut. And I always think how great it looks. Every competition that he would.
Yeah, worth the flight. Yeah.
Worth the flight. Looks great. It's spectacular. Okay. Man of the hour, Shoma Uno. Injured coming into this competition 10 days ago, had a bad fall in practice here. And I mean, obviously showed a lot of mental strength. I wonder if the injury in a strange way was a distraction that allowed him to just focus and not worry about the pressure as much. I mean, I don't know. It would be interesting to hear, not knowing how bad his ankle was, not being in his body, but he seemed very concerned coming in here, but just was magical. And
yeah, especially in the short, I felt. Yeah.
And I thought his free, yes, he had some jump, on the quad sal jump moments, and his axel wasn't as steady as we've seen it in the past, but
he did the job.
The section, the section with his spread eagle into the camel spin, like the whole transition is just.
And again, I could be wrong on this. I think this is the first time we've ever heard a countertenor in a program at the World Championships, and it just so matches to me the magical uniqueness of Shoma with the magical uniqueness of that voice type. It just all worked, and his collapse at the end was very telling. And because the cameras had those aerial views, it was adorable. They cut to the aerial view of him, like it looked like he was doing a snow angel on the ice at the end of that program. I started to wonder about Junhwan's chances because there was the quadruple sow issue, and then the first quad toe was under, or it was on the quarter, and then the second quad toe was also on the quarter and into the single toe loop. So for a second, their score was basically a tie in the free skate. It became a much more exciting win than I think I anticipated.
Yeah, and I think that they did good judging here, which they didn't in the ice dance event, was that Shoma's marks were not 10s for components. Right. They reflected more of, yes, he's maybe one of the two best skaters here, but they kept him by and large between 8.75 and 9.5 for all of the.
Which was exactly right.
Japan did give him a 9.75 in skating skills, which you can, argue, one way or another, although he has phenomenal skating ability. So I just thought the way he moved his body with that music, it was not his best performance of the season, but for a world championship win, I thought he did a great job.
Under those circumstances. And again, it's hard for me to sort of put myself in the shoes or skates, I guess, of a Japanese athlete competing at a world championships on home ice. Mm-hmm. I think that kind of pressure is something the North American skaters cannot feel in the same way.
And Mark Hanreddy pointed out the fact that he defended a world title, which Yuzu hadn't done. Oh, he should not have said that on Twitter. People went at him, but I think he was meaning to point out how unique of an accomplishment it was. But
yeah, everybody calm down. God, I thought we got rid of that army.
So, It was just a spectacular achievement. We don't, it was a spectacular achievement, right? It
was on home ice. Incredible.
Have 2 world titles, yada, yada. Yuzu has 1 million Grand Prix final titles and other Olympic titles and whatnot. Do you see Shoma? What do you see for his future in terms of?
I have a feeling what we see from Shoma now is Shoma at his capacity. Yeah. I don't know. We will see additional things. I think now we know what he has, and we will continue to see different packaging of the same things now.
He's a little tired. Maybe he needs some time off, a vacation.
Yeah. And again, he's such an interesting performer. I'm mainly intrigued to hear what their music selections and program direction is for the next season.
Hopefully not John Mayer for the short, but would love to see what he comes up with next.
Yeah. And that's what I love about this group of men, is that in so many ways, I can't wait to see what they come up with next. And I can't say that about every discipline.
I know that Lambiel really wants Shoma to continue. Would love to see it. Hope he does at least one more season. I think he could win a 3rd world title.
I think so too.
I don't know if he has 3 more years in him at that level, but you never know. I think Yuma coming back has a lot to offer artistically behind Shoma. But would like to see, Sota Yamamoto, we saw great things throughout the season. Artistically, nowhere in this conversation.
And a tougher skate for him here. Yeah.
Almira is no performance, that could run. So I think that Shoma is a preeminent figure, and I think the respect for him growing by people around the skating world, because he's been someone that's been kind of a frantic competitor in the past who's learning how to control the mind more. And I think
Yes.
that is what is so impressive, is he's maturing.
Mhm.
And I think that Stefan has obviously had a strong hand in that with him. So kudos to Stefan for, the work that they have done there.
Because as everyone looks towards the next Olympics or coming season as being Ilia's to lose, I think the judges made themselves pretty clear here.
And I wasn't surprised. Some of his quads, they talk about the quint all the time, but some of Ilia's quads have looked very Q or under for at certain times that he has been injured throughout the season. I would be curious how often he's able to maintain. He made a comment that he trained really, really hard for the 2 weeks before here. That was just strange. Like, you think people would say, like, I trained hard all year, right? Like, not that he wasn't working hard, but you wonder, like, how often can you train 6 quads? Like, how do you do that, right?
Well, and what was interesting about doing having the championships in Saitama was they were including some of those like data things that they do for Japanese nationals. And when they were talking about the quad axel, and I could be misquoting it, but I think this is correct. They were saying when he lands that sucker on the knee and the leg is 800 pounds of force. Mm-hmm. I thought that was the first time it was sort of put to me in a way of how much stress the body is taking doing these things. Yeah, 800 pounds of force every single time you land that thing.
Yeah.
Nuts.
But he did a great job here. The quad flip, not his best. His short program was spectacular. The judges sent a big message that he needs to work on the performance, his skating skills. I actually, they talked about the difference between him and Jason. I think that the components could have had a bigger difference. Yes. Without his reputation. And if you're actually just judging the skating, it could have been even more.
And what was fascinating to me here is it was the American judge that had him lowest in PCS. Like, the PCS scores from the US were in the 7s. And yet from all the other countries, they were kind of going low 8s. But America also sent the message. Like,
America was also the lowest for Jason Brown compared to everybody else, which...
Oh, is that true?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Gross.
Skatingscores.com is your friend. So maybe not Kevin Rosenstein's friend, but I imagine Kevin would say, well, I scored everyone within range and look at the, I used a wide variety of marks, yada, yada. But I do think
But he had Ilia 13th in PCS. Mm-hmm. I mean, Austria had him 17th, but then Korea had him 5th. It's clear, like, even though they don't exactly know what to do with what they see, it is clear they're sending the message, it's time. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, Ilia even gave a comment.
He did say he wants to be. I don't know that I believe that. I think it's a nice thing he's saying right now when he's looking at his components. But here's the thing is, like, yes, because Ilia now is going to say he wants to work on his program components, right?
Just so you come back and do the same thing and then everyone pretends they see an improvement. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing is that how much are you really going to improve them over the next months? If you've neglected an area for a long time, it takes a long time to get them better. To get the meaningful number of points, are enough points on the table for components? Or would just going clean have helped him more, right? Like, that's kind of the quandary. And if he focuses a little bit more and is clean, would that kind of make the difference?
And
right?
People will bring up Nathan inevitably in these moments. However, as we have discussed in the past, Nathan started with great skating skills and was very artistic and kind of shelved them as he focused on the quads and then tried to reincorporate them. I don't know that this is someone that has a Peter and the Wolf program video somewhere.
No. And Nathan had the ballet training, he had the gymnastics training, he had better posture, toe point, deportment to start with, right?
And what's interesting also is, aside from Shoma, no one is really revving up the amount of quads as it was at the last Olympics. So there is no Nathan right now. So Ilia is trying to like technically beat a Nathan, but there is no Nathan competing. So one would hope you could take the opportunity to just calm the quads down by just the slightest bit and train them, but maybe don't compete them, and try to get this other mark under control.
Well, I think the quads that he does do need to be clean and landed with a little bit better quality so that they could give some of those points. They could give the GOE, higher GOE on more elements tends to lead to better PCS, so on and so forth. It just wasn't an easy watch, right?
And he does have a showman side to him in a way that they can start with and sort of figure out. What I thought was so smart about the program in the Olympic season was that he ended with that headless scratch spin.
Which he does.
Suddenly you get all these credits for these sort of like old school things that may not garner a point, but suddenly make you seem more performative. So if he throws in a few more of those kinds of moments, I think it can sort of trick us into being more entertained.
Yeah, and I wonder, he's done a number of, he did the Art at Ice shows. I imagine he'll do shows over the summer. I do think that eventually that starts to translate over and you start to think about that more or watch the other skaters and see how the audience appreciates them. And then you start to kind of incorporate that or look at what you could do. So he may have more ideas for next season going. So on and so forth. So hopefully Keegan Messing did not have his best outing here. They have said he is ending his career, but then Mark said, why doesn't he just stay one more year? And I think everyone has kind of been indicating, why don't you stay one more year?
And the short program was exceptional. That was an exceptional moment. That was really heartwarming and lovely to see. And again, unfortunately for the men's final, I saw the results before I watched the skating. So seeing the placement, I thought he might have done worse than in fact he did, because all things considered, he really only had 2 errors, just the edge call on the flip, and he popped the one axel. But overall, it was still a nice performance with 2 clean quads and would be a nice performance you could look back at. But it did throw him in 11th in the free skate. So that's tough. And of course, where did he end up overall? 8th? Am I making that up?
He was higher than that.
7th, excuse me. And of course, Conrad not making the free. So now what does that mean for Canada next year?
Look at the spots allocation. You're putting me on the spot here.
Sorry, because I remember this happened. Like, so even though he's in the top 10,
prepared to talk about Canada spots for next year. Canada does have 2 for next season.
Okay.
Top 10. So yeah.
But for some reason,
3. South Korea has 3. The US has 3. France, Canada, Switzerland, and Italy have 2.
Okay. For some reason, I thought when someone didn't make the final, didn't that happen to us one year?
And then when Vincent had to solidify the spot based on the Olympic.
Right, that's what it was. Yeah. Okay.
I would say I thought that Kazuki was phenomenal here, and I think Misha did a great job with him. He's someone that I was nervous because there's so much depth in Japan, and we've seen Kazuki kind of have like 1.5 good programs sometimes, and then we've seen the potential and hoping he was going to deliver here. He did a bunch of smaller competitions before this event that may have helped. I think in general, I want to see a little bit more stretched limbs from him next season. So I know Misha is all about dance, and if you could do Pilates and work on that. And then I think what was great about his La La Land program is that it had variety of the up-tempo stuff that we love from him and a little bit more flow and lyricism.
Ballad vibes. Yeah.
I think that they need to find a piece of music that emphasizes it, because I think they've really worked on his relationship with the audience, right? And that he is,
and they have done an excellent job at it.
But I almost think the music is too quick and frantic, and I felt like he matured beyond it in about October, November, right? Where it didn't keep developing and it's just him being like this. But I think if they can focus on really emphasizing the ride out, because he gets a little quick. He can have a great quad toe or he can rush the entry. He can have a great quad sal or he can rush the entry. And he needs to be more consistent with the one coming back.
That I watched on NBC. And Johnny kept talking about, interesting because he was only talking about Kazuki doing this and not other skaters in the past from a certain country he never mentioned about. But you know how we talk about sometimes like the chicken wing arm position?
Brady Canal.
And he kind of does that a little bit. And Johnny was convinced like a whole technical arsenal would open up if he was sort of addressing the arm position a little bit. The only other thing, and I don't even want to give Johnny any credit, but when the steps, were going to begin for the Fledermaus, he was like, get ready for some Richard Simmons energy. And I was like, that's okay, I'll take it. Because I do not know how, when we see so many people running out of steam at the end of a program, that he revs up the energy that much and then finishes completely at ease. I don't know how he doesn't collapse at the end of that huge burst of energy at the end. It's just remarkable.
I do think it's interesting. I do think so. Kazuki, I think if they can find that right mix of a ballad with up tempo for him for next season, I think he can mature a little bit artistically and grow into that leading man on the ice. I think he's been like fan favorite in a Kevin Aymoz type way, and like now you need to take that next step up, because I think he should be ahead of Sota Yamamoto more often than he is. I think the consistency and finding the right vehicle. I think that the short program just felt frantic the whole season. It was great. It had his personality. It was a bit of a show program for me, where now we need to
elevate.
Yeah. And I think he is capable. So I don't think that Sota has the performance within him, right? Like I don't.
And then showed when the jumps aren't there. Unfortunately, we didn't really have much to count on with his 15th, finish here. Who intrigues me though sometimes is Lucas from Switzerland.
I think he's
an enjoyable watch, really, really enjoyable watch. Some things to grow on. He's one of those that tries to always have the steps or transition directly after the jump. So sometimes they just seemed like they landed at a standstill or didn't. I miss that flow kind of feeling sometimes when people try to do that. Standing ovation, a great quad to start. I really enjoy his skating. So it was nice to see him do well here too, because I didn't know what to expect after Europeans.
So what was your moment of the men's figure skating at these World Championships?
And quick shout out to Matteo Rizzo for doing that quad loop, because I love a quad loop. Yeah, I am going to say, are you ready, Dave? Junhwan Cha, quad sao in the short program, Junhwan Cha, quad sao in the long program, or free skate rather. Just obsessed.
I would say the entire final flight of the men, plus Kazuki. In general, it had the kind of great feeling when we would watch the free dance and watch the top five. Like, it was just spectacular and nice viewing in that way. But in general, that stretch of time between Jason, Brown, and Kevin, where you have Tracy jumping up and down, and whatever Sylvia and Kevin have going on the Kiss and Cry with those performances was just it was great.
What else had a nice moment here was the Azerbaijani skater.
Yes.
But also a nice, even for these, the lower down in the placements, for everyone to still be giving like wonderful skates and wonderful personal bests and great performances. Just the entire event was such a palate cleanse to the other disciplines here, I found.
Yeah, and also Johnny Weir announced he's opening up a skating academy this year, and I always find it fascinating, a skater that didn't take his pro skating choreography seriously and didn't appear to enjoy training is opening a skating academy. And is that good or bad? Maybe he's making training more engaging.
Is he curating the trainers, or is he intending to be one himself?
He said he is. So we will see. I'm interested. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I think that that's interesting that someone that didn't love training, but that doesn't mean anything, because my coach Kristen didn't love training, but she's a very disciplined coach. So I don't know, maybe you're good at what you didn't love, or it's just like an interesting thing. So
yeah, maybe you'll find a way to make it enjoyable for the skaters to work with when it wasn't for you. Yeah,
I just think it's interesting. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I'll be intrigued to see how that goes in. But yes, so more to come on that. Hold it, I just look sexy, everyone.